Okay, thank you, counsel. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's different, we call them Bates numbers that you'll see in the lower right of these pages. But these 3 pages will be admitted as Exhibit 834. So 834, just don't forget to get stamped by the clerk.
We're good, thank you, Your Honor. We have what's now 834 on the screen, please. So, Dr. Baily, this is another record for Hera Carrier. You see her name at the top. 3rd line down on the right side, it's talking about Hera's presentation. Reads, now presents with encephalopathy. Do you see that?
Yes.
Hera was presenting to someone in the hospital with encephalopathy, wasn't she?
That is what that note says. It'd be helpful to see where in the record we are. Sometimes these things are listed as rule-out diagnoses before it's been confirmed, so I'm just not sure where we are
Okay.
in the record.
Shane, in that set of 3, can we go to the next one?
What was the next base stamp, Mr. Mirkovich?
666-0046. Actually, let's go to the one after this, please, Shane. Six, Shane, 0074. There's a problem list on this document. Do you see that, Dr. Baily?
Yes,
Problem 2, hepatic encephalopathy, right?
correct.
You're still not sure whether Hera had encephalopathy or not?
It does say it there, and again, without being in this situation, I'm not a medical doctor, I don't know where they were in the diagnostic phase of that work. I tend to look at the discharge diagnosis and the final diagnosis, because sometimes there are working diagnoses that they are considering and they get listed in the problem list, but then later get ruled out. So again, without knowing where we are in the record with regards to their evaluation process, it's hard for me to confirm that, but it does seem like they were considering it at that point.
Right, it's problem number 2 after acute liver failure, isn't it?
Right, but in medical records, oftentimes problems lists are just a summary of the things that they're considering and working diagnoses. They're not necessarily confirmed yet.
We have 534-0054, please. It's exhibit 534 at page 0054. This is a record for Christopher Wren. You see his name at the top, Doctor?
Yes.
Management suggestions number 6. Very similar to the Sever Morales record we saw a moment ago. It reads, perform frequent neurological check. Wherein okay for clears and ice chips, but make NPO if encephalopathy worsens, close paren. Do you see that?
Correct. I do.
Talks about encephalopathy getting worse, not presenting itself, correct?
It does say that, yes.
The doctors wouldn't have worded it that way unless you already had encephalopathy, right?
It's possible. Again, in these situations, oftentimes when they come in, there's an acute illness, there's symptoms, they're not sure what are associating with them, causing the symptoms. They will make a list of possibilities and monitor and treat all of those things until they have reached final diagnoses. Oftentimes where you will see the final conclusions and the final diagnoses are in the discharge diagnosis. It does look like they were monitoring it, they were considering it as a possibility. I just can't say with certainty as whether or not that was a diagnosis that was confirmed.
Exhibit 575 at page 16, please, Shay. This is a record for Lyric Williams. Let's go down to the very bottom where it says primary impression. Primary impression here, Dr. Baily, is acute encephalopathy for Lyric, right?
Yes.
Lyric was suffering from acute encephalopathy, wasn't she?
It is again the same response. It's at that point they were considering that. I don't know from this whether or not the diagnosis was confirmed.
So coming back to the question I asked you at the outset, when you reached your conclusions in this case, you didn't consider the fact that these children had encephalopathy when they were undergoing their liver failure, did you?
It was not a confirmed diagnosis, and therefore, based on the fact that those diagnoses were not made at discharge, the symptoms seemed to improve, and they weren't showing any symptoms, I can't say whether or not they had encephalopathy for a brief period. It's a transient issue. What I can say is that if they did, and I discussed this with you at the deposition, that's a risk factor for poor outcomes. But even if it's a risk factor for poor outcomes, you would still want to base your considerations and your conclusions on how they're functioning currently. Because encephalopathy, once it resolves, you're not going to see then later degeneration. There's not a future decline associated. Once the encephalopathy resolves, the functioning of that individual, you would expect to be their functioning moving forward. There's not an expectation that future decline is going to occur. So when I said that poor outcomes are associated with the presence of encephalopathy, that means that if people have that, if children with liver failure have that, then they are associated with poor outcomes. But you would see the effects of that in the immediate present. You would not see later decline down the road associated with encephalopathy.
Dr. Baily, you referenced Dr. Hudson's testimony earlier today, correct?
I was asked about it, yes.
Yes. And Dr. Hudson has determined that the children in this case have suffered fibrosis on their livers, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I mean scarring on their livers, right?
That's correct.
That's something that we typically see in adults, right?
Yes, typical.
Because normally the amount of trauma that the liver needs to sustain to get to the point of fibrosis is extensive, correct?
Correct.
In reaching your conclusions in this case, you didn't consider the presence of fibrosis on the children's livers, did you?
It's not that I didn't consider it, it's that in the research available, there was not a significant amount of research that I found to be relevant to these cases that related that fibrosis to poor outcomes neurocognitively.
Can we play back Dr. Baily's deposition testimony at page 31, lines 10 to 16, please?
Come on up.
Dr. Baily, you recall your deposition.
Would you like it published?
Well, I was gonna play let me go back and go over that.
Go ahead, counsel, sorry about that.
Dr. Baily, you recall your deposition back in April, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at your deposition in April, I asked you, did you consider the extent to which the children here suffered liver fibrosis? And you said that you couldn't say that you did. Do you recall that?
I don't recall those exact words, but I'll take the word for it.
It's consistent with your general understanding that you didn't consider the extent to which the children here suffered fibrosis on their livers, right?
What I'm saying is that there's not research that would suggest that that's necessarily associated with a different outcome. So and maybe what I meant by that is that it doesn't change my opinion on the outcome because there's not research that would substantiate the difference.
Other than the liver fibrosis article that Dr. Sands mentioned that the jury saw last week, did you review any other articles about liver fibrosis?
I reviewed articles pertaining to children with liver fibrosis. So again, the article Dr. Sands referenced is in regards to adults with a variety of other complicating health factors. So I didn't find that to be relevant to this situation.
All of the studies about liver fibrosis show that it's associated with poor outcomes and a number of different neuropsychological fields, fair?
Again, there are not any cases that where liver fibrosis can really be isolated because oftentimes the way liver fibrosis occurs is associated with other medical problems, with other issues like alcohol use or other viral hepatitis, things of that nature that can cause damage to the liver that also can affect cognition. So the situation, it doesn't apply in the same way to this situation because these children don't have those other complicating health factors.
You also read studies by Dr. Sorensen, correct?
Yes.
And you understand Dr. Sorensen is a pediatric neuropsychologist, did fellowship training at Harvard, she's a professor at Northwestern now.
That's correct.
And she's written more articles about the neuropsychological impacts on children with acute liver failure than anyone else, right?
Correct.
We have exhibit 426, please. Dr. Baily, Exhibit 426 is an article that you referenced in your work. Dr. Sands testified about it last week. You read this, right?
Yes, sir.
And this is a study that's limited to children with acute liver failure, right?
That's correct.
This doesn't have subjects in the study that had chronic liver disease or something like that.
Some of the children included did have issues related to viral hepatitis that can be more long-lasting and result in additional hospital admissions than just a situation with a toxic exposure, but it was acute liver failure, yes.
Shane, can we go down to the right side there where it says conclusion, please? Up a little bit, please. Conclusion, right there. Dr. Sorensen concludes long-term pediatric acute liver failure survivors demonstrate average IQ and visual spatial ability, but greater than expected impairments in motor skills, attention, executive function, health-related quality of life, and fatigue. You see that?
Yes, I also, I had a look at this paper in more detail since my deposition, and if you take a look at the tables, the scores, while are statistically significant differences, meaning that the difference between the score in the clinical population and normal population, there was a statistical difference, they actually weren't clinically significant. So if you look at the scores themselves, the scores for the children with acute liver failure were all actually still in the average range. It was just that the statistical significance was different. And that gets a little messy, but basically you can have a difference that the stats find to be, the chance of them not being random are less than 5%, which is what makes it statistically significant. But when you actually look at the magnitude of the difference, it doesn't necessarily equate to a difference in function. The scores were all, for all of those abilities that they referenced, were still average, in the average range. So what we would call within normal limits.
So when Dr. Sorensen concludes that the impairments she sees are greater than expected, you think she's just making a big deal out of nothing?
It's not that she's making a big deal about nothing, it is that they are statistically significant. And with research, that's often what you're after. You want to know, is there a difference between these two groups? That's different than clinically significant. What I'm worried about, what I'm interested in, is would the difference in these scores affect their day-to-day life? And if you look at the scores she reports in the table, they're all still within the average range. Again, not expecting to cause functional impairment, daily impairment effect on their life.
Nothing further.
You need to read through it, right?
Yes, ma'am, sure. This is a large and pull up exhibit 426, page 1, when you get a chance. And lower right column, you look at. While Mr. Zamora is pulling up the Sorensen article, the medical records that you reviewed for the children, these are all from 4 years ago,
That's correct.
November of 2020.
Yes,
And you are not a medical doctor, correct?
correct.
And you're not offering any opinions critical of any of the medical doctors that took care of these children.
No, not at all. When I review medical records, my goal is to see what I can see with regards to the medical record that applies to what we know about neuropsychology and neuropsychological functioning. I have to rely on their diagnosis and as they're reported in the reports.
And the data that you're relying upon besides the medical records are the password codes, right?
From a psychological standpoint, that's all we have at this point. That's all that's been administered at this point is parent report and the VASC parent questionnaires.
And those were done by the plaintiff's expert, Dr. Sands.
Yes, sir.
When about were those done?
I believe it was in January roughly of this year. I'd have to check the records to verify
January
that.
2024?
I believe so, yes.
So 4 years, almost 4 years.
Yes.
So obviously the 3 years and 3 months, I guess not 4 years. I don't want to
Something like
exaggerate,
that.
be accused of
Yeah,
of
something
that.
like that.
So 3 years later.
Yes.
And the VASC scores are important as part of the evaluation of these children, both Dr. Sands and yourself, right?
They are, although in my practice, I would never administer a questionnaire of that nature independently. I see questionnaires self-report as helpful as part of the clinical picture, but they are, again, as I mentioned previously, they are quantifying subjective complaints. So they're quantifying the parent's perception of their children. They don't have the objective ability to assess functioning in the way that our standardized neuropsychological measures would. So in my practice, I use questionnaires of that nature to supplement parent interviews, again, to help quantify what they're telling me in the interview, as well as the neuropsychological measures that are more objective.
All right, and then going back to Exhibit 426, the Sorensen article, lower right-hand corner, right above the date stamp, we have a statement, a study of children with acute viral hepatitis found, et cetera, right?
Yes.
So this was a study of children with acute viral hepatitis. In layman's terms, what is acute viral hepatitis?
It's basically a swelling of the liver that is the result of a viral infection. And that can go on for longer or shorter, again, not a medical doctor, but my understanding of it is that it can go on for varying amounts of times with varying chronicity depending on the type of hepatitis it is. So hepatitis A versus C versus B, et cetera.
So for your purposes, as for a neuropsychological evaluation, is this an apples to apples comparison?
It's not. It's not for a variety of reasons. There's also the increased ammonium and other issues here that are more chronic in nature. These children, the infection went on sometimes, and again, they don't say which type of hepatitis it is, so it's a little difficult to know, but I would not say it's a direct comparison, no, which again limits the inferences we can make from the data, separate from the issue that the findings are not, while statistically significant, are not clinically significant.
Doctor, again, all of the opinions that you've offered today are to the best of your knowledge and within a reasonable degree of certainty within the field of neuroscience, neuropsychology, and psychology.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Very briefly, Your Honor. Sure. We have 426 again, please. Same portion, bottom right-hand side of the first page. Dr. Baily, I'm going to reference, this is what Mr. Odou was talking to you about. He highlighted the portion talking about the study of children with acute viral hepatitis.
Correct.
At the end of that sentence, there's an 8 in parentheses there. Do you see that?
Yes.
That's a citation because this sentence is talking about not this study, it's citing to another study, right?
Yes.
Okay. Acute viral hepatitis is not the subject of this study, that's why it's citing the footnote number 8, right?
I would need to read it in more context to see exactly what they're getting at, but usually that's the format that's used.
Right. And you mentioned ammonia a moment ago.
Yes.
You saw ammonia levels being high when you reviewed these children's medical records, didn't you?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Again, the Sorensen article is in reference to a collection of children with various forms of hepatitis, correct?
That's correct.
It's not an apples to apples study with the children injured in this case, is it?
It's not.
Thank you.
Any questions from any of your? Okay, we have some questions that Dr. Baily from some of yours. If liver scarring bridging fibrosis is permanent, should the kids and parents have frequent therapy and neuropsychological evaluations?
I think it is permanent, but my understanding is that it doesn't necessarily equate to, it has been demonstrated anyway in children with acute liver failure to equate to long-standing problems. The studies that have shown an association that were cited and talked about by Dr. Sands are, again, related to adults that have a number of other health factors that are associated with the fibrosis, including hypertension and diabetes and cirrhosis and heavy drinking and things of that nature. So my conclusion would be, as I stated previously, not without reason. So if they are showing impairments in their functioning, if they're struggling academically, struggling socially in their life, then determination for that would be warranted. But there is not been anything that would demonstrate it necessarily gets worse or progresses unless there is additional insult to the liver. And again, that's my understanding, not as a medical doctor, but with regards to the effect on neurocognitive functioning, there's not an assumed poor outcome as a result of just liver fibrosis alone without those other complicating factors.
Did Chris Wren's existing therapy evolve to include therapy related to events with real water?
Not that I know of from the medical record. As far as I reviewed, and it's possible that he's had additional treatments that were not provided to me, but from what I reviewed, his therapies were associated with his original diagnosis and were in place before this exposure. There hasn't been the parents have expressed a concern that they believe the stressful events may have had an effect on him and caused a regression, but that has not been supported in the data or in the literature I reviewed.
What studies were you referencing that are not evidence-based? The ones presented by Dr. Simmons?
No, I wasn't referencing any that weren't evidence-based. I was just suggesting that evidence-based is how, I believe I was in response to a question of why is research important? And basically, I was stating that it is important to inform our treatment with evidence.
If hydrazine caused liver scarring, why can we not compare it to other causes of liver scarring / fibrosis?
My understanding from that is that, again, a lot of the causes of liver fibrosis that have been discussed in the research cited are in reference to long-standing chronic health problems or lifestyles or things of that nature, as opposed to exposure to hydrazine, which was an acute episode. The toxin has been removed and the exposure has not continued. And so therefore, we wouldn't expect further damage to occur unless additional exposure or additional factors, other health factors, then became an issue.
With exposure of encephalopathy event and the kids being so young, do you feel they will need some type of neuropsychological treatment in the future?
As I was stating before, the encephalopathy is associated with poor outcomes in that if the brain swells as a result of the health issues and the liver issues, then that can cause damage. But you would see those effects in the immediate. There's not research that would suggest a delayed effect or a progression or a future decline. So again, it would be if they began to have difficulty. I don't think we want to say it's not possible, because we don't have the research to say it's not possible. But we don't have the research to say it's guaranteed, and in which case, I don't think it's appropriate to put children through regular evaluations unless there is evidence that they're struggling, evidence that there's been impairment and that they're having difficulty, in which case then it becomes appropriate, and the results of that baseline evaluation would inform future treatment.
Any follow-up from the defense?
No.
Any follow-up from plaintiffs?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Your Honor, I may be excused to walk after doing that.
Unless you can watch my hand.
Your Honor, Real Water calls its next witness, Jillian Olsen.
Your Honor, can we change just repeat this?
Oh, is she on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
And my understanding is that we're connected?
Or you prefer to, or cameras off?
Oh, Kemp.
That's good. Turn her camera.
Ms. Olsen, if you can hear us, can you turn your camera on?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, there we go.
Could you please raise your right hand to be sworn in? You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Jillian, Jillian. Last name Olsen.
Okay, first thing I want to say is good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Good afternoon, Ms. Olsen.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
I don't know what view you have of the courtroom, but I will tell you that you are looking right at the jury. So
okay,
that's,
thank you.
that's what they see you on the screen. And so can you introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Jillian Olsen. I am the owner of a small consulting firm in Pennsylvania known as Cherry Bridge Consulting. We are a woman-owned and operated business. I specialize in bottled water industry services, as well as wetland services and some general environmental consulting for our clients.
Give us a little background on your education.
Certainly. I received my Bachelor of Science in Biology in 2000 from Moravian College, which is now Moravian University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. While working full-time, I attended Drexel University in Philadelphia and graduated there in 2010 with my master's degree in environmental science, ecology, with a minor in toxicology and industrial hygiene.
In addition to your education, I understand you hold some licenses and other credentials?
I do. Relevant to what we're discussing here today, I am a qualified environmental professional, which goes by the acronym of QEP, under the Institute of Professional Environmental Practice. That is a global certification. I am also a process controls qualified individual, which goes by the acronym PCQI, and that is a recognized qualification for the food industry under the FDA for food quality assurance in manufacturing.
Can you tell the jury about your experience in the bottled water industry?
Yes, I have more than 20 years of experience in assisting bottled water companies and water resource owners with developing water resources, either wells or spring water sites for use in bottling water products, assisting them with their permits at the bottled water plant facilities, ongoing compliance, and monitoring at their facilities, and just, general upkeep of their records and water quality testing.
Okay. I also understand you're a board member of IBWA. What is that?
IBWA is the International Bottled Water Association. They were formed in the early 1980s, basically to have an industry group, an international industry group that represents bottled water and the standards that they adhere to.
Do you know how long you've been a member?
It has been more than 10 years. I don't remember the exact timeframe as I joined as a member with the company that I previously worked for, and the date escapes me, but it is definitely more than 10 years.
How long have you been a board member?
I am now serving my second 3-year term, so I believe I'm in my 4th year as a member of the board of directors.
Okay. In your work with bottled water companies, you've been involved in the collection and submission of water samples for testing?
That is correct.
Have you been involved with bottled water companies who are under audits?
Yes, I have.
And you have been involved with programs for the companies to operate under. HACCP is one that's been discussed in this case. Have you been involved in that?
Yes, I have.
Could you elaborate a little more into what is involved in these type of programs and creating them?
So generally speaking, under HACCP programs or other food safety programs that may be required for a company under the Federal Food Safety Modernization Act, I have assisted bottled water facilities with developing these programs, writing their plans, verifying and validating the information that is included, writing and reviewing with them their process flow diagrams to make sure that all appropriate information is included. For the HACCP plan portion, reviewing their hazard analysis and identification of critical control points. And also for a specific medium-sized bottler that is located near my office here in Pennsylvania, I am a contracted process controls qualified individual for them because they have a small staff. And it's difficult for them to have everyone that they need to serve every role possible. So I assist them with those duties and visit the plant regularly.
Okay. You've been retained by Real Water in this case, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. What were you asked to do in this case?
I was asked to review the NSF audits, just to understand, what occurred during those audits, and was it, reasonable to assume that, corrective actions could have been done between one audit and the next. Also to look at water quality data in comparison with any applicable lists, that the state may require them to sample to.
And I want to make it clear, you're not here to testify regarding hydrazine being in the water and the effect of hydrazine, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you don't dispute that hydrazine is a toxin and that it should not be in bottled water?
I do not dispute that, no.
Generally, what did you review to formulate your opinions?
I reviewed the NSF audits that occurred between 2014 and 2019. There were several audits in that time frame at the the Real Water bottled water facility, the Desert Inn location. I also reviewed laboratory analytical reports from various laboratories. I believe the dates for those were from 2016 through 2020. I focused on the ones from 2018, 2019, and 2020 as they were most applicable to what we're discussing here in this matter and the timeframes involved. I also reviewed various other expert witnesses, documents, or I should say exhibits and expert reports as well.
Okay, thank you. Is hydrazine a concern in the bottled water industry?
It is not.
And why isn't it?
Hydrazine would not be a chemical or a constituent that would be expected in any way to be present in a bottled water product. Reviewing information that's published by the agency for tripping over my words, I apologize, the Toxics Registry, hydrazine is intentionally manufactured for use as, as I'm sure you've already discussed in this case and heard, a rocket propellant or fuel. It's used in some cancer research, it can be used in medicines and other items like that. So it has an intentional purpose for manufacture and not something that would ever be involved or thought to have any reason to occur in a bottle of water.
Where did Real Water get its water in order to make its product?
It is my understanding that they obtained their water from a municipal source, which is the Las Vegas Valley Water District.
And is public water already tested?
Yes, public water systems are held to whatever state that they're operating in, a set of parameters that they test for.
Is public water tested for hydrazine?
No, it is not.
Now, there's been some testimony regarding gas chromatography, mass spectrometer. Did I say that right?
It's very close.
Okay, well, that's the last time I'll be saying it. I'll refer to it as GCMS from now on.
Okay.
Is non-targeted GCMS testing done in the bottled water industry?
No, it is not, and not without reason.
Okay. And both public and private water is not tested for hydrazine routinely?
Correct.
And is this a standard in the bottled water industry?
Correct. It would be a standard practice that you would not test for hydrazine. It is not a constituent that is on any standard lists, state or federal or municipal lists of parameters that you would test for.
When is non-targeted GCMS testing involved in water?
So in my 20 plus years experience in environmental consulting, you would use non-targeted GCMS testing and the type that was used in this case, which is known as a library search, where you're looking for an unidentified constituent or contaminant and trying to figure out what it is in comparison to known basically spikes on that GCMS. You're using that when you are sampling groundwater or soil or surface water runoff in areas such as a landfill or an environmental release at maybe a cleanup site, where you're trying to determine, okay, we sampled a known set of parameters, the things we expected may be there, but there's still something that doesn't seem quite right, or we seem to maybe be missing an item on this list. So we'll run the GCMS library search to determine what is it we're missing, and then that would give you that answer. And that, from my understanding of what I reviewed, is similar to how the FDA approached how they did the testing in this case as well.
Do you know when hydrazine was found in the real water?
I believe it was fall of 2021.
Do you know when the FDA collected samples of the real water?
My recollection is they were on site for, their investigation in March or April of 2021, and they collected samples at that point in time when they were at the facility.
And hydrazine wasn't discovered until about 6 months later?
That is my understanding. I know it was fall, October is ringing a bell when the analytical reports were finalized from the FDA's investigation.
Was Real Water unaware of hydrazine being in the water?
speculation. The response. You can rephrase.
I'm sorry, Judge, I could not hear you.
Sorry, that's my fault, I apologize to you. So I've asked Mr. Freeman to rephrase if you would like to.
Do you know if Real Water was aware that hydrazine was in their product?
Same objection, Your Honor. Sustained, you can ask a different question.
No, I'll move on.
Go.
Is a water for a bottled water product coming from, let me strike that, let me ask it a better way. Bottled water products that are created, do they come from an unknown water source?
No. They would come from a known water source.
That had been tested?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned audits, the process of auditing the water companies. What are audits in relation to the bottled water industry?
They are, I would say, an important part of the bottled water industry and maintaining the integrity of the products and understanding your process and conformance with certain standards.
And that's why they have a third party perform the audits?
Yes, that is correct.
And are these audits scheduled?
Typically, no. They are unannounced. They meaning the audit company, may give you a time frame of, a month or a couple of months and ask you if you have any dates that the team at the facility may be unavailable. You're off for a holiday or you're shut down for a cleaning procedure or something like that. That is typical, just so they know not to come on those days because no one will be available to be with the auditors to go over paperwork and provide a tour of the facility. But otherwise, they just show up.
And you reviewed the audits that were performed by NSF International of the Real Water facility?
Yes, I did. The ones that were completed for the Desert Inn facility.
Okay, and I think you mentioned before, what were the years of those audits?
2014 through 2019.
Okay, and did you review all the audits during that period?
Yes, I did.
Okay, you didn't go through and pick and choose the ones to review. You looked at the ones that were good as well as the ones that were not so good.
That is correct.
Now, every audit notes that where there are some areas where Real Water could improve. Is that one of the points of an audit?
That is. Generally, any third-party audit, you will have points of where you could use some improvement, areas of, you may have areas of non-conformance depending on, the facility or the auditor and what they deem to be a non-conformance against the criteria or the criteria they are auditing against. Yes.
Okay. Let's look at one of these NSF audits. Mark, if you could put up Plaintiffs 209, it's already been admitted. Do you have, do you see that audit, Ms. Olsen?
Yes, I do.
What is NSF International?
NSF International is it's the National Sanitation Foundation is what their acronym name stands for. And they are an auditing body that performs these third-party audits. Their specialty really is in the food and beverage industry when it comes to auditing. They provide other services as well, certification to their own internal standards. They do have an internal laboratory that can do sample analysis. They provide consulting services. But as I mentioned, they are an auditing body, and that was their role with conducting a bottled water plant audit.
Okay. Are you familiar with this audit form?
Yes.
And this is what they use to document their audit?
Yes, and they have different formats depending on the customer that is requesting the audit. In this case, you'll see it says audit type under audit information. So this is specific to it being for Costco. So Costco has criteria that they request to be included in the audit, is my understanding. So this is the format that NSF uses specific to an audit for Costco as the customer.
Okay. If you'll scroll down, Mark, to the summary of category. What is the summary of category?
So this is the different categories, the section categories there it's my left on the screen. The visit information through food defense. Each of those categories has different information under each piece, which the auditor reviews in that category that kind of go together. And that's how the audit is really divided up.
Okay. In this case, they scored an overall grade of 82.4. Is that right?
Yes, I see that.
Okay, in grade school, that'd be a B minus, and I'll tell you, my parents would have been thrilled if I could get a B minus. But as far as Costco standards, that didn't pass, right?
That is my understanding. I believe Costco's passing score is a 85% or better.
Okay.
Is their criteria.
So this is an audit where Real Water needed to correct some things.
Yes.
Now, one of the categories is the HACCP section. Do you know why that was an issue on this audit?
Based on my review of this audit documentation and other expert reports and testimonies that I have reviewed relevant to this case, I believe it may have to do with an employee that resigned shortly before or possibly day of that audit, which while the HACCP program may have been in place and it wouldn't overall affected it may have affected, say, availability of documents. Other folks, maybe scrambling to not be prepared because again, it's an unannounced audit.
Okay. Going down on page 1, section 1, visit and company information. What is that important for?
This is documented on any audit, whether it's NSF or any other company that's performing an audit. Basically to document who they're meeting with, what company they're at, what areas of the facility they're auditing. I believe on the next page it also lists things like numbers of employees, the square footage of a facility. Yes, they're in the number 3. and just general information, hours of operation. This documents what the auditor is reviewing and also helps to qualify the size of the facility and the resources, the number of employees, the people that are present at the time of the audit, that the company has available to them during the audit process.
Okay. We've been recently informed that the auditor notes in color are magenta, and not to be confused with the color purple. Is that your understanding of those notes?
I guess I could agree they're magenta.
Doesn't bother me. But is that your understanding? Those are the notes that the auditor puts into the form?
Yeah, they would do that.
Okay. And then going on to section 2.
Sorry, council can come first.
Can you hear me, Ms. Olsen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Just a couple more questions. Then after section 1, it goes on to section 2, and the rest of the report is just hitting on each of those summary of categories you discussed before?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what happens if a company doesn't meet the standard of the audit or pass?
So if they do not, as you stated, meet the standard of the audit or pass the audit for the criteria that are included, they would be required to schedule and have performed a re-audit within a certain time frame. I believe that is, generally within 3 to 6 months. It sometimes depends on I'll call it the auditing scheme, which criteria they're being audited to and which company's doing it, but it's generally a pretty fast turnaround time for that re-audit to be completed.
Okay, and in this case, I understand there was a re-audit, and we will get into that after afternoon break.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our afternoon break. Come back at 3:35. During this recess, you're admonished not to talk or converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this trial. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial or any person connected with this trial by any medium of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspapers, television, internet, radio. Do not visit the scene of events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any investigation. Do not do any posting communications on any social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until the case finally submitted to you. See you back at 3:35.
Please rise for the jury.
Anything we need to discuss?
Would you mind if Ms. Olsen put her mute on
Yeah,
the
you
screen
can
while we break?
mute and take off the video. Just we'll be back at 3:35. Thank you.
Please rise for the jury. Please be seated.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for your service and patience. Is the defense ready to continue?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, thank you.
We can hear you too. Before we get into the re-audit that we stopped with, going back to that 2019 audit that we just were talking about, they had problems with the HACCP section. Remember that?
Yes, the 2018 audit, yes.
18, sorry. But your reviews of other audits show that Real Water had HACCP programs before, correct?
That is correct. There may have been some auditor comments on those items, but they had various, has some documents, or programs in place according to auditor comments on the prior audits.
Okay.
Yes.
Mark, can you pull up plaintiffs 203? It's already admitted, I believe. Okay. Could you scroll to the summary of categories on the first page? Can you see that, Ms. Olsen?
Yes.
Okay, do you see, what's the date of this audit?
December 5th, 2014.
Okay. And on the summary of categories, what did they score in the HACCP section?
They scored a 95.6% on the HACCP category.
Okay, and that's passing, correct?
That is my understanding, yes,
Okay.
because it is greater than the 85%.
Okay. You can take that down, Mark, thank you. All right, let's go and talk about this re-audit that was performed. And this is Real Water Exhibit 2041. Is this been in evidence?
Yes. All the NSF reports are.
Okay. If you could pull up that exhibit, please. Okay, what's the date of this audit?
On February 21st, 2019,
Okay, and it's classified as a re-audit?
yes, it is.
Okay, and that's because of the prior score in the last, the audit from last December?
Yes, from the December 2018 audit, yeah.
Okay. What was the overall score on this audit?
The overall score there at the bottom, under category score, was a 95.5%.
Okay, and that's a passing grade considering Costco's 85% requirement?
Yes, it would be.
And you reviewed this report?
Yes, I did.
Did you see corrective actions that were taken?
Based on the auditor's notes, it appears that yes, corrective actions were taken for the items that were noted in the December 2018 audit report.
When I asked you earlier about information that you reviewed, you mentioned audits, testing, communication. Did you come across emails between Real Water and NSF?
Yes, I did.
And I guess I should specify, in regards to this audit and re-audit process.
Yes,
What were those communications about?
I apologize. One moment.
Take your time, get a drink of water if you need to.
I'm okay. My review of the email correspondence, my understanding as I read it, just based on the text in those emails, was that Real Water was reaching out to their contacts at NSF after the 2018 audit to understand the items that they had non-conformance or not passing grades on. It appeared in that email correspondence that they did not have a favorable experience with the auditor and maybe some communication breakdown, but they were also asking for assistance from NSF to understand and to help them move past that, is my interpretation of the text that was included, and, help them understand the standard. And they had even, I believe, asked in the one email that I read if there had been updates to the Costco audit process. I don't remember if that was specific to this audit or a different one in the process, but with NSF, but yes.
The Real Water wanted to make the corrective actions?
Yes, they did. based on those emails.
Can you pull up that exhibit again, Mark? We're pulling up that exhibit again. I'll ask you, what was the HACCP section score at the re-audit time?
So the HACCP section score on this one for the re-audit was a 100% score.
Can you go down to section 3? Now, at this time, the auditor made notes in this section that Real Water had established a HACCP team and had the required team meeting.
Yes,
And they had someone HACCP trained,
yes, I believe that's item number 2.
and there was a HACCP plan available at this audit.
Yes, based on the auditor notes.
Okay, and the auditor had some notes here, looks like giving more feedback about expanding and providing more detail on their notes. What was do you know why an auditor would do that?
Auditors may put those details into their notes in an audit plan where, specifically when it says expand and provide more details, that what they reviewed was adequate for the criteria, but they're looking for maybe, it would be helpful to have more details.
Just more notes to help a company continue to improve?
Possibly, yes. That is based on my experience with similar audits and similar notes from auditors.
And you reviewed this entire re-audit report, correct?
I did, yes.
In your experience with audits, what did the report tell you?
The report overall told me that Real Water took the steps to improve their process and have their documentation in order and complete the corrective actions that were noted on the previous audit.
Okay, thank you. You also testified that one of your responsibilities with bottled water clients is to collect and submit water quality samples. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Can you tell the jury what that involves?
For that responsibility is, really exactly as it's stated. I assist bottled water customers with collecting the samples. So typically, a laboratory provides the bottles or the collection containers for the samples that you are collecting for submission. And in some cases, depending on what you're analyzing for, you just return the actual finished bottle sample. So your actual bottle of water is submitted to the laboratory. So in that regard, I assist clients with that actual collection of samples, and then filling out the chain of custody, which is the record that goes with samples, specifying the date and the time it was collected, who did the collection, and what analyses are requested on that sample, shipping it to the lab, typically in a cooler on ice, and then the laboratory receives it, and they provide the report back to the bottled water company. And I've also assisted in reviewing the analytical data to make sure that any applicable standards are met for any of the parameters that were tested for.
Did Real Water have testing performed on the water it produced?
Based on the documents that I reviewed, yes, they did.
Okay, and what type of testing was performed on the Real Water?
I reviewed documents, analytical reports from laboratories that included analysis for bacteriological items, such as total coliform and E. coli, what we call general wet chemistry, so pH, color, odor, total dissolved solids, those sorts of things. Your chemical, those were like the physical parameters, your chemical analyses, so volatile organic, semi-volatile organic chemicals. I'm trying to think some of the other parameters that are in there. Metals were in there. Radiologicals were in there as well, so radioactive elements are tested for also. So those were all included in analytical reports that I reviewed in the documents, and I believe the time frame of those reports was from 2014 through 2020.
About how many compounds are tested for on these tests?
There's a lot. In a comprehensive, say, annual analyses where you're looking at pretty much all of those things I just mentioned, you're probably looking at about 90 plus constituents.
So referring to the test as just a bacterial test would be oversimplifying the testing done.
In my opinion, yes. That would be just one element of the testing.
And in testing for all these compounds, unfortunately, hydrazine is not one of the compounds tested for.
I'm sorry, Eric, could you please repeat your question? I did not hear it completely.
Okay, testing for all the compounds for these tests, unfortunately, hydrazine is not one of the compounds tested for?
That is correct. Hydrazine is not a compound that is tested for.
What is the frequency of the testing?
So in general, the bacteriological tests on the water itself are completed weekly. You have monthly samples for some of the constituents. The one that's most commonly done monthly is bromate. You may have, depending on the requirements where the facility is located, you may have quarterly testing. They call them swab samples, and that's to actually check the container or the bottle and the caps for bacteria. And it's called the heterotrophic plate count, or HPC. And then that annual analysis that I just mentioned of the, give or take 90 plus parameters, that includes the bacterial testing as well as the physical parameters, that general wet chemistry, the pH and odor and total dissolved solids and things like that, metals, and your chemical constituents like volatile organic compounds, semi-volatile organics, radiologicals, metals, and all of those as well. And that one's done on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you. You testified that you reviewed a large number of lab water testing results for your work on this case?
Yes, I did.
And I think you said you reviewed testing as far back as 2016, but you concentrated on 2018, 2019, and 2020?
Yes, that is correct. I apologize. 2016 was the earliest data, confusing the dates of the audit and the analytical testing. You are correct. 2016 was the earliest analytical data I reviewed.
Okay.
But concentrated on 2018, 2019, and 2020.
Okay. Let's pull up one of those test lab results. Real water exhibit 2060. It's already been admitted. Now this is testing performed by Wet Lab. Do you know what this test was for?
If we could scroll down, I do not recall off the top of my head which one specifically this one is. I believe the next page might tell us. Possibly the next page. I apologize. It's usually on the there we go. This page here. So this is if you see there, it says PO/project under the address for real water. It says 2000, on the left-hand side. There you go. It says 2019 annual analysis. So this is being submitted as that, so the annual analysis of the water product.
Okay, and wet lab, also known as Western Environmental Testing Lab, perform the testing on the real water for this 2019 annual?
At least for the portions of it that they are accredited to, is my recollection. I believe it indicates on the chain of custody that is with this analytical report that they needed to subcontract some of the analytical testing to another laboratory, which I believe was Eurofins, because Wet Lab or Western Environmental was not, or is not accredited to perform some of the tests. And that's common in the laboratory industry. Some labs just, they don't receive enough of that type of sample or don't run it often enough that they don't have all of the equipment or accreditations. So they subcontract to other labs to perform them.
Okay. So basically what you're saying is all the testing that's done, some labs can't do it all, they need to get other labs to come in and assist?
Yes, that is correct.
And this analytical report, is this the testing that you described previously?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all the compounds?
Yes.
What are some of the methods and equipment used for these testing?
So there are, you'll see in that method column, there are various methods used in order to perform each of these tests. And there's actually a handbook published by the EPA that lists the methods that are specified specifically for drinking water, which is what these would be analyzed for. So, for instance, you have the general chemistry, they all have their different test methods, you know, for color and pH and whatnot. Then you'll have your anions, which all have, you know, are all done by method EPA 300.0, which is an ion chromatograph test. Your trace metals, please don't ask me to remember exactly what ICP-OES stands for, but that is a different test methodology.
There's not a test at the end.
Okay, good.
I saw on page 4, there's mention of GCMS. Is that the GCMS testing that was discussed earlier?
So this would be a specific methodology or a more targeted test for these specific compounds. So GCMS is an instrument, the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. And this specific method that you see there, the EPA 524.2, that is the laboratory equipment that is used to analyze these specific compounds, which can essentially be volatilized or bubble off, so to speak, from the water into a gaseous form. So therefore, it's appropriate to use that type of equipment to recollect them and analyze for them and determine the concentration. So it is the same type of equipment, but a different type of analysis, if that makes sense.
Okay, yes, thank you for that explanation. All right, I want to go to another exhibit. I don't believe it's been admitted. Your Honor, you would offer, like to offer into evidence Exhibit 2059.
The defense hasn't shown that to us yet, so if we can move on and you can show us a copy, that's the protocol.
All these testings. I don't have a physical copy to hand them. They have all the exhibits. They should have it at their disposal.
Judge, the protocol is,
Yeah, come on. Ladies and gentlemen, an issue came up, so we'll, instead of have us standing up here talking for however long, we're gonna take another break. So come back in about hopefully 10, 15 minutes. During this recess, you're advised not to talk or converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this trial. Do not rewatch or listen to any report on the commentary on the trial or any person connected with this trial by any medium of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspapers, television, and internet and radio. Do not visit the scene of any events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any investigation. Do not do any post communications on your social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until it is finally submitted to you. See you back in like 15.
Please rise for the jury.
But have a seat. So, 2060 has been admitted, right? 2041 is not, well, there's been testimony about that one, I guess. 2059, 2110, 2217 have not. So let's rehash what we talked about here.
Judge, from what I can tell, these are not business records of Real Water. One of them appears to be a business record of Western, whatever it is. And none of them have Real Water ID on them. So the suggestion at Vince that these are business records of Real Water, I don't see any evidence of that. So I don't think any of them can put them. In addition to the violation of protocol, that they were supposed to notify us yesterday of exhibits they were using so we could cut an examination, and to be in the middle of a defense expert examination and say, well, here's 3 new reports I'm going to talk about without even showing it to me or telling me about them, I object to that too.
Thank you. Any response?
Yes, I'll acknowledge that. Did not provide them a copy this morning. I was under the incorrect assumption that these had been disclosed with the other water testing reports. The water tests and the reports have been discussed at trial here. They've been brought up, other witnesses and experts have testified about them. There wasn't any objection raised to these reports in the pretrial conference. And they have an opportunity to take a look at them now. They're just additional water testing results like the ones that have already been brought up. The one that 2060 that we just discussed, that was an annual test performed by wet labs. The 2059 is the annual test that was done by Eurofins. The 2110 was a testing of the real water final product, and the 2217 was the testing of the E2 concentrate. They're all water testing reports that were commissioned by Real Water, and some have been discussed and already brought up by other witnesses and lodged as exhibits. Unfortunately, these ones hadn't, and I overlooked that.
Not one single witness in this case has discussed any of these exhibits by exhibit. The reference he's referring to is general references to bacteria testing or some other testing. So to suggest we should have been on notice that these 3 exhibits were coming in, and again, this is a violation of protocol, Judge. I mean, from what I can tell, it's cumulative. He's just trying to show that there's bacteria and other tests being done. And so for all those reasons, I don't think these should come in. And there's no foundation for it. They haven't offered the PMK of Silver State Laboratories or Western, whatever it is, or and there's not one single Real Water witness that has gone through these in detail and said anything about them.
Anything further on the defense?
Well, as to the comment that none of this has been talked about before, 2060 has already been admitted as an exhibit. And so that is the same type of test that the other ones are. So it's not quite true that testing has not been discussed or reports been made exhibits. Other than that, nothing further, Your Honor.
So 2060-2060 has been admitted, right? Okay. And she talked about, you went through her with 2041 already, I think, is that correct? That's why you had me.
So they had discussed previously exhibit 2020 when there was no objection, and so they were gonna, if they wanted it admitted, just sort of briefing on it.
Okay, so 2020, they're not even asking now. Okay, so 2041, what's that one again?
That's a duplicate of plaintiff's plaintiff's exhibit 211, so that shouldn't be controversial. I don't think it would be admitted if it was used plaintiff's 211, avoid confusion.
Well, so 20, I was gonna say, but this further supports what I was gonna say, because that one's already been talked about. Maybe there was no objection because it's identical, so 211 has been admitted, 2041's admitted. Yeah, it's duplicative, but the number talked about now is 2041.
Objection 3 items you have to, are 2059, 2110, 22.
17. Yeah, no, so I wanted to make sure, so 2041 had not previously been admitted, is now, and I haven't done that yet, but it is now, and so now I have to, consider the 3 objected to. Oh, and I know you just said, what is 2041/2211 again? What test is that one?
I'm sorry, which one, Your Honor?
2041.
No, the other ones, 2110 and 2217.
No, so I need to back up a little, sorry. So you characterize 2059 as Eurofin annual, 2010 as real water final, 2217 E2 concentrate. As I said here, I don't recall what, because part of the argument is cumulative. So what's 2041? So I get a better basis of what I've already admitted.
I don't know what 2041 is.
It's
2041.
No, I just admitted 2041, it's the same as 211. I just don't remember what it is.
Oh, it's
not-
the re-audit. I'm sorry, we used the plaintiff's exhibit number for that, 209.
That's 2040.
Okay, I gotta go off the record and you guys gotta be able to tell me, because I don't have these in front of me, what exactly we're talking about, okay? Off the record.